Hey everybody, I'm Xloto and welcome to Let's Play Dragon Quest Side by Side. Obviously inspired by other popular Let's Play series, in Side by Side I will give you commentary, walkthrough, and trivia, but with a twist. I'll be playing as many versions of the game as I can, at the same time. You'll be able to see with me what changes were made between ports, remakes, and translations of the original due to censorship, localization choices, flat-out errors, or whatever, and hopefully learn something interesting and entertaining. So, to start off, we'll be looking at all the different versions of the game, and what better place to start than with this one. What we have on the screen right here is probably the best known of the original releases of Dragon Quest, the one for the Nintendo Famicom. It was released in 1986, along with several other versions for different computer systems, and it started it all. The graphics were fairly simple. The character sprites were only drawn to face in one direction ever, and rather than a battery backup, you were given a password system to keep track of your progress through the game. So if you lost your notebook, you were out of luck. Now here we have the first of two versions released for the MSX computer system. Now the MSX is a very popular home computer system from the early 80s until the mid-90s. It was never really sold in the US or the UK, but in Japan, Brazil, and most of Europe it was hugely popular. And a lot of series had games on it, like Castlevania, Dragon Quest obviously, Final Fantasy, Ys, and some series actually started on the MSX, like Bomberman, Parodius, Puyo Puyo, and Metal Gear. Metal Gear 2 was actually first released on the MSX and never saw another release that I know of until it was put in as bonus content on one of the Metal Gear Solid games. This version of Dragon Quest is a cartridge for the MSX1. It has much reduced color depth from the Famicom version, but it's otherwise pretty similar. This one coming up here is the cartridge for the MSX2, which was an upgraded version of the MSX, and this actually has increased color depth from the Famicom version, so even if I don't spend a lot of time on both of these, I'll definitely be looking at this one because I want to show you the more colorful graphics. The slimes look awesome, Drakis look awesome, just Dragon Lord looks awesome. Everything looks really nice. It's almost like it is kind of a mid-range between Famicom and Super Famicom, really. Now here we are finally to probably the most of our first experience with Dragon Quest, which was Dragon Warrior from 1989 on the NES. This game is pretty well known because of the Nintendo Power promotion, in which free copies were given out with subscriptions, excuse me, to Nintendo Power. That's how I got my copy. This was the first role-playing game I ever played, and well, you can see where that's led me. Anyway, the name was changed from Dragon Quest because of a trademark conflict with TSR. So the games we saw, Dragon Warrior 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 when it arrived here, the Dragon Warrior Monsters games, they all had the Warrior moniker instead of Quest. So this version of the game introduced some new features. Sprites were improved so that they can face in 4 directions instead of merely one. There was a coastline added, a coastline graphic added to the ocean tiles to match the upgrades that were done for Dragon Quest II, and to match the upgrades done for Dragon Quest III, we got a battery RAM save instead of the password system that the original Dragon Quest had for all of the other versions previously mentioned. Now, did you see anything happen at the bottom of the screen just there? Go ahead, back up the video. I'll wait for you. That's right, the word to changed to of. There were actually two versions of the game released in the US, the PRG-0 and the PRG-1, which made very, very minor fixes to the program code. One of them was to change this two-letter word. Who knows why? The other change was in battle. The PRG-0 version says thy hits have been decreased by whatever number, and the PRG-1 version corrects that to say thy hit points have been decreased. So it's a very minor fix. I'll be playing the PRG-1 version because there's no point in playing both, and I just prefer the grammar. Here we have one of the more obscure versions of Dragon Quest, ported for the Sharp X68000 in 1992. You can see it booting up through the OS here, and this is all we get for a title screen. After the loading and copyright information there, showing that it is copyrighted to Mitsuru Kamiyama in addition to Enix, there's a warning which tells you, please do not use this software to earn money without permission of Enix Corporation, or else you're in danger of copyright infringement. So don't sell this. Below that is your selection between start and continue. You actually get a save file in this version. It saves to disk instead of giving you a password, but you only get one save per disk and no warning about overwriting. So if your brother comes by and writes on your copy, then you lose your adventure. Too bad, sorry. Below that is an interesting little tag that says test version 1992 January 26th. So all of that put together gives me the idea that this was unofficially programmed. This Kamiyama fellow, I did a little bit of research and found his name attached to the credits for some of the Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles games. So I don't know if perhaps he programmed this and then was hired later by Square Enix for those. But in any case, I won't be covering this version. I may look at it a little bit just as a side curiosity if I get a lot of requests, but I don't intend to look at it in depth with the others. Now what we have here is the Super Famicom version of Dragon Quest. It was released on a multi-cart with Dragon Quest II, and it was the first major revision of the game. It included improved graphics, improved sound, revamped button configurations to remove some of the tedium from the menu interactions. And that's about all I know of it, really. I haven't looked at this one in depth before. I haven't played it on my own, so it'll be my first time looking at it. And now the NEC PC9801. Similar to the Sharp system and the MSX architecture covered before, the PC98 was popular in the 80s to the early 90s. It saw a lot of use as a gaming platform with a lot of RPGs and a lot of dating sims. Despite not being as powerful as the competition, it had a pretty good run for a machine designed for business use. Now, it went by too fast for the video capture, but I managed to catch this screenshot. Notice it says test version on here as well, on the startup screen. So it seems like it's also an unofficial port, like the X86K, and I won't be looking at this one either, except possibly a bonus episode. Next up is BS Dragon Quest for the Satellaview add-on for the Super Famicom. This was a satellite device which would attach to the expansion port and allowed you to link up with the Saint Giga satellite service in Japan. They would broadcast games at regular intervals. This particular one was split into 4 episodes. You could play it for 1 hour each day, and each week they would switch to the next episode. It had voice acting, it used orchestral score. It looks like it was really nice, but unfortunately I'll be unable to play it, as none of that extra data exists outside of the ROM, and Saint Giga doesn't exist anymore either. This was another multi-cart released for the Game Boy Color in '99 of Dragon Quest 1 and 2. It included a lot of the revisions that were made for the Super Famicom version. Of course, being on the Game Boy Color, the color palette isn't as good, the sound isn't quite as good, but it's still a really nice version of the game. Some players don't like it as much as the original because the balance of the monsters and the levels, stat raising and such was tweaked so that the game is actually quite easier than the original, but I don't have a problem with that. And this is the US localization of the same game, Dragon Warrior 1 and 2. In this localization, a lot of the names were reverted back to be closer to the Japanese originals. So US gamers saw the name Loto for the first time, whereas before it had been Erdrick. And that's about all of them. There's also a mobile version of the game in Japan that I obviously won't be able to cover because I don't have a Japanese cell phone on a Japanese cell phone network. And there you have it. These are the versions of the game that I'm going to be looking at here. Going to get started right away. I'm going to pick a name from the suggestions that were given. I do want to mention that there are several fan translations out there. There's a couple of different English versions of the Super Famicom release, and for the Famicom and NES versions, there are translations into Chinese, French, German, Portuguese, and Swedish that I've seen. I don't know any of these languages, but if anybody asks me to, I can certainly go ahead and look at them in a bonus episode and get a little bit of info about them. And now, on with the show. Next up, Let's Play Dragon Quest Side by Side, Episode 2. The first episode with actual gameplay. Bye-bye.